Do you ever wonder which props are really worth the money? Which ones are the most versatile, the most useful to have at home? Maybe you just wonder which props us professional Pilates instructors wish you had at home. Well, let's go ahead and talk about it. Hey friends, it's Kate here. Thanks so much for joining me today. Now, of course, as you know, there are so many videos out there of mine and other people's where we don't use any props at all. You can get a wonderful, beautiful, full body Pilates class, not using anything but your own body weight. But let's face it, props are fun, or at least I think so. I love using props. In fact, if you ever take a class with me in a studio setting where I have a plethora of props to choose from, I like to think of myself as queen of the props. To me, it's so exciting to develop new exercises that feel creative, fun, unique, and sometimes help us concentrate more on just using the prop than like focusing on how long we've been in our Pilates class. Nothing is better than when time just flies by when you're in class, right? Not only can props make things more fun, they can also make a lot of exercises much more accessible to all bodies, all shapes, all sizes. It makes a big difference when we've got the right tools to really help us fine-tune our Pilates practice. However, I do know that most of us simply don't have the space or the money to purchase every single piece of equipment out there. Even myself as a professional, there are certain pieces of equipment that I will simply never have at home. There are, though, 4 props that I really do wish everyone had, both because they are so versatile, there's so much you can do with them, and also they don't take up a lot of space in your house. So first up on the list is a stability ball, a Pilates ball, whatever you want to call it. It's one of my favorites for a handful of reasons. First of all, it's very affordable. They are super cheap in stores. It's also small, so it doesn't take up a lot of space. It's very lightweight, so easy to move around if you need to. And then on top of it, it's such a versatile tool. It's such a wonderful prop to have around. It is great for strength building, especially my students that have trouble really learning how to engage their core muscles, or maybe have a little bit of pelvic floor health issues going on. This tool for me is one way to get those students to really engage some of those deeper, more mysterious muscles now and then. And of course, we can put it in between our legs, between our kind of like our knee pit area. There's so much you can do with it. You can use it in all sorts of areas of the body for strength building. But as I mentioned, it is quite versatile, so we can stretch with it as well. Placing it underneath your sacrum, lying with your feet up, that feels amazing. Bringing it between your shoulder blades, lying back, that's one of my favorite after work exercises to open up my chest. Now, when purchasing one of these, what are the things you'll want to think about? Honestly, the brand doesn't matter to me. I have used a plethora of brands and they're all pretty much the same. So find whichever one works best for you, whether it's the price or the color. The thing you might want to think about is the size. Now, typically I recommend using a ball between 5 and 9 inches in diameter. The one that I've been using for the past couple of months is a little bit bigger. It's about 9 inches. And I think the one that I had earlier here on my channel was closer to maybe 5. Realistically speaking, there's very little difference here when it comes to the size of it. I would say you just don't want to go over 9 inches or under 5 inches. That's the parameter you want to be in. Next up on the list is a foam roller, and this is like the Swiss Army knife of Pilates tools in my opinion. I love a foam roller for a handful of reasons. Again, they're pretty affordable. Some are more expensive than others. It just depends on the brand and if there are any particular things you're looking for, but most of the time you can find one fairly affordably speaking. And the reason that I love a foam roller so much is because we really do have a lot of things we can use it for. If you enjoy taking Pilates reformer classes on the machines, a reformer is a great way to give you that instability that leads to that deep abdominal core work. One of the reasons that people love working on the reformer so much is the carriage moves, that piece moves, which means it is much harder, even if we're doing arms, even if we're doing legs, to keep your core engaged and working. If you lie head to tail on the foam roller, you can kind of recreate that at home without the use of a giant piece of equipment. And of course, I hope you know that you can obviously roll on the foam roller itself. Wonderful for some myofascial release. That's one of my favorite things to do. And also some of the most beautiful stretching can occur there, especially for our upper body and our hips. When purchasing the foam roller, there are a few things you might want to think about. For the most part, again, brand doesn't make much of a difference to me. What you'll want to make sure of is the length. We want one that's 36 inches in length that our head and tail can lie down on at once. The short ones are fine, but you're not going to be able to do a lot of that mat work on it if it is not long enough. Another thing to consider is the density of the foam roller. I like deep tissue massages. I like to roll and get really deeply into my muscles, so I just go with the strongest density one that I can find, and that's most of the foam rollers out there. If you're a little bit more sensitive, don't worry, there are softer foam rollers. In fact, I will link to a specific one that I'm thinking of that is made for physical therapists, and I have used this in a number of studios, and it is truly much softer than the regular ones. And for clients that have maybe that more sensitive skin, sensitive muscles, this is a great way to start working on a foam roller. Next up is the TheraBand or resistance band, whatever you want to call it. I tend to call it a TheraBand simply because that's the brand that I most often use, and that's what I've been calling it for years, but technically they're resistance bands. Now, just like our Pilates ball, these things are cheap, they are very small, and they're very easy to put away. They also, like the foam roller, can make your mat class more similar to a Pilates machine class. Again, if you've taken any kind of Pilates machine work, either on the Cadillac or the Reformer, you'll know that there are lots of springs, lots of pulleys, all sorts of things to hold on to give you support to crank it up in your arms or legs, and our TheraBands can really do that for us on the mat. Not only can they make some exercises more challenging, they'll help us make certain exercises a bit more accessible. Sometimes there are things on the mat that we simply cannot do without the assistance of a prop, of a tool, as we're building the right strength. And resistance bands are a fabulous way to incorporate those deeper movements while still feeling strong, confident, secure in your body. Now, I also love using resistance bands for particular exercises in our feet and our ankles. These are places that are maybe harder to strengthen without the help of this tool. I have a lot of videos where we do focus on the health of our ankles, and it's one of the best ways that I've found to really help that area of the body. You can also use it for stretching. Stretching with our TheraBand is really nice. Having that extra give there makes such a difference. Maybe it feels a little extra juicy in your muscles when you're stretching here and there using something like a resistance band. When it comes to purchasing one, there are a couple of things you'll want to think about. Now, I like the TheraBands that are long and thin, like this. I do not like the tubular shaped ones at all. For me, they just don't seem they seem less versatile. I understand that some people like the tubular ones because they often have handles attached to them, and if we have wrist issues, that can be a little bit better for us. So you're obviously welcome to do what works for you. But with the long, thin ones, as I was talking about the ankle exercises, when we put it around our foot, it'll wrap around the heel, or it'll wrap around the toes, and it's much more likely to stay put. When you have those kind of tubular ones, it might roll off the foot up or down a little more easy, and that doesn't always feel very safe in our bodies, does it? As far as the brand goes, it also doesn't particularly matter. As I mentioned, I typically refer to them as TheraBands, which is a specific brand of them. TheraBand's been around for a long time. A lot of physical therapists use them in their work. Because of that, I typically do recommend those ones, and they come in a variety of strengths. If I was gonna buy a set for myself right now, I would make sure to buy one that has a heavy, a light, a medium in it. It is nice to have the differences. If all you have is one, though, it's certainly not the end of the world, and that's totally fine. Last up is a yoga strap or a stretch out strap. Now, I realize this isn't technically a Pilates tool, but most of us want to stretch at the end of a Pilates class. I almost always build in a little stretching, whether it is a in-person class or one on the video, and using a stretch out strap makes such a big difference when it comes to our stretching. Oftentimes we're not as flexible as we want to be, or maybe we think we are, and if we just yank our leg, our arm in certain directions, we might feel a stretch in certain places, but if you're hunched over or curling your tail up, you're just out of alignment, you're not going to get the deepest variation of that stretch. And again, this is a prop that is super small, super cheap, and so it doesn't take up a lot of space, and there's so much you can do with it. When it comes to purchasing one, though, I am going to be particular and say the brand isn't necessarily important to me, but the style is, and that's why I kind of call it both a yoga strap and a stretch out strap. Technically, the stretch out straps have the little loops in them, and I find these to be super helpful, especially when doing upper body stretching. For one thing, if we have any hand issues, being able to slide your hand into it means you don't have to hold on to it anymore, which is so much nicer for those of us that do have maybe hand, wrist, kind of issues going on, whether it's carpal tunnel or something else. It's one less place that we have to grip. And then just being able to have the hands in that little space and pull it apart means that we get a little bit more of an active stretch. So of course it's not necessary to have the one with the loops, but if you're about to purchase one for yourself, I would advise getting the one with the loops. I think it's a little easier to use, more accessible for most bodies. Now you might be thinking there are two props that are often used in Pilates classes, especially here on YouTube, that I haven't spoken about, and you might be wondering why. The first one are weights, and honestly, hand weights are so easy to come by. I feel like almost everyone has a set at home, so I didn't feel like it was worthwhile saying it's good to have them. I think we all know that, and they're easy to put into your practice at any point. The other one is a magic circle, a Pilates ring, whatever you want to call it. And I do love those. They're fun to play with, and there's a lot you can do with them in a Pilates class, but they're not very versatile outside of a Pilates class. So I wanted to make sure all of the props I suggested today are going to give you the most usage, take up the least amount of space, and really bring you a lot of wealth of exercises that you can play with and do and figure out on your own. If you want extra Pilates ring classes, feel free to let me know in the comments below. When it comes to everything I spoke about today, our ball, our foam roller, our stretch out strap, our resistance bands, those are things that I feel like everyone can afford, everyone probably has enough space for, and you're gonna be able to use them not only with me, but with a ton of other instructors in a ton of other modalities. Feel free to let me know if you have questions about any of the props, or maybe there's a specific piece of equipment I haven't spoken about or you've not seen me use on this channel and you'd like to. I'm always happy to hear what we're in the mood to learn next, so just let me know. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I cannot wait to see you again.